Alright, shut up. Sourdough time. We have, first of all, ingredients. Water. 700 milliliters of water. Plus another 50 ml set aside for the next stage. We've got olive oil, extra virgin, the good shit. And then probably the most important ingredient of sourdough, the sourdough starter. Aki, this is 180 grams of sourdough starter. I'll get Aki to explain that in another video. It's a bit of a process there, but this is, you can see, ready to go. Bubbling. The olive oil, you put in about 20 ml, but I just like give it a good glug into the water. Then you got a kilo of flour, which is made up of 900 grams of white flour, just baker's flour, and then 100 grams of wholemeal. So you can probably see the wholemeal just sitting on top there. Little flecks of stuff in there, so 100 grams of that. And then again, I use about 30 grams of salt, but you'll put that in after the next stage. So the 50 mils of water and the 50 grams of salt comes in after the initial mix. So the initial mix is pretty straightforward. Now I'm gonna just figure out what to do on camera. Damn man, this tracking is so sick. Okay, so I am gonna chuck the starter in first. Now the key with the starter is that it should be floating. There is a whole bunch of stuff to learn about the starter, and again we'll explain that in another video. But when you're adding it to your bread mix, what you're looking for is for it to be floating on top of the water. So I'm just gonna, it's really annoying trying to get it all out, bear with me. Get a little bit of extra water in there. Just get all that good stuff out. Scrape it all to the bottom. All right. Okay, so your starter, it's kind of probably hard to see, but you see how it's floating on top, or you can just rock the water around and it's just bubbling around there. That's what you want. If it sinks, your starter's not ready. You want it to be all gassy and floating on top. Give that a little mix up. Separate it into the water. So again, 700 milliliters, 700 grams of water, 180 grams of starter, and then I just eyeball the olive oil and just give it a good, yeah, probably something like that. It's sort of like 20 to 30 grams of olive oil, and then you literally try and emulsify the oil a little bit, just so you don't have big clumps of oil. Sort of hard to do, but yeah, you sort of just want to get it into lots of finer bubbles. Doesn't really, I don't know if it does anything, but I do that. And dump in your flour. So, now this is a bit of a process, especially in a bowl like this, but it's just the bowl we got. You don't have to sift it or anything, you're just dumping it in. Now, 750 milliliters of water, or 750 grams of water, and to a kilo of flour is considered a high hydration recipe. So it's wet. So the dough that it makes will be very wet, but it's amazing how much just a little bit less water changes the properties of the dough. So that 50 ml off to the side, this dough in this initial mix will be a little bit like craggy. I know it's not a great descriptor, but it will be drier obviously, because if you're holding off some water. But you'll sort of notice that, and it will take a second as you're mixing it. It will feel like you don't have enough water. Don't add any more, because it just takes a second for the water to soak into the flour and for it to hydrate properly. You can sort of see it looks sort of wrong at the moment, but that will all go away pretty soon. Honestly, from a time consumption perspective, like throughout the day, obviously you sort of need to be present, but like all up, total time spent mixing the dough initially is probably the most time consuming part of the entire process. Other than that, it's chill. I think it takes like the later stages, which we'll run through, takes like less than 20 seconds for each stage, but you just have to do it in regular intervals. That's the only. You can sort of see that the dough is like, it's you know, like craggy. It's sort of like, I don't know if you can see that in the camera, but it's like, it looks, yeah. It doesn't look well combined or anything, but it's amazing as like as the gluten starts to like form into I don't know, more complete, uniform, longer strands, whatever. Like it starts to, the dough starts to strengthen. They call it strengthening the dough. So at the moment it'll sort of tear apart really easily like that. You won't be able to, you can take big clumps of it and it'll just tear off. All right, I actually need to get a utensil out. Now if you don't have these, they are amazing. They're like dough spatulas. Oh, darling, Aki, can you just really quickly help me? Oh no. You combine them, can you not do this? There's two here that are stuck together, okay. So this one's like a silicone one, which is really good for scraping in this initial phase, and then this one's really good once it's like you're ready to form it into loaves. So I'll use that in a second. But like, I just use this to then get around the outside. Like this. I mean, it's definitely a messy process, but you can do it in a way that you're not getting flour everywhere and actually keeping it pretty, yeah, pretty clean. But at this stage, the dough is going to be pretty sticky, and it's going to like stick to everything. But most importantly, it will want to stick to itself. So one of the easiest things to do is to just like use the dough itself to. All right, so that's pretty much it for this first phase. Just want to make sure that it's pretty well combined. And in a second, I'm going to come back and in 45 minutes, so you leave that to sit for 45. And then in 45 minutes, you'll come back and we'll add the salt and the rest of the water. And what you're doing is before, I need to read up on this, but the salt, you don't want to add the salt too early. If you add the salt too early, you'll, it will affect the final like outcome of the dough. So don't do that. I can't tell you exactly why, but yeah, don't. I find it way easier just keeping on top of the cleaning. Sorry, this video is going to be longer than intended. Okay, so second stage. So it's been 45 minutes. Obviously I didn't cover it up in the last video, but we just used beeswax wrap to cover it. Seems to work fine. You just don't want it to, tea towel as well. So this stage is pretty straightforward. You're just adding the salt and the water to the dough. Sprinkle that over. And your 50 ml of water, like so. Now, I was shown this technique, and I think all it's doing is it's what you're just like almost like you're making a focaccia. You're just pushing the salt down into the dough to help it combine and disperse, so that you don't just have like a layer of the camera pedal. So you're not getting like just a layer of dough, salt that you're then just folding into the dough. You're just getting this like thin layer through it. You're actually getting it between all the layers, and then you literally just start like pulling it out. The other thing as well is that here it's getting pretty hot, so I would actually chuck this in the fridge after this next stage to keep the dough cool, because if you want to keep it about 20 degrees, any hotter than that and the dough is just gonna rise too quickly. It's gonna get way too active, and you're just gonna have this like really bubbly mass of dough, and it'll be overdone basically, especially when you put it in the fridge for its bulk rise. All right, so I just use the water in this process to basically scrape off and clean up the bowl. It just helps with cleaning, but also then you're just sort of getting everything into the dough. And then yeah, it'll go really slimy at this stage as you're adding the water, and as that water is starting to combine, and you're sort of wanting to, it will try and if water gets between layers of dough, it'll start to separate a little bit. But you're waiting for the dough to sort of soak up all that water, recombine, and it'll start to get sticky again. And you'll feel it go from slimy to sticky. Honestly, I don't really think there's a technique here, but I sort of fold it and rub it into itself. You can already see it starting to get stickier. You can start to see it's holding together much more as well. Again, that first 45 minutes just gives the dough a second to strengthen and to build. Allow the gluten to start building those bonds and stuff throughout the dough. You start to see it's now a bit more of a homogeneous mass. Alright, that's probably good. You can start to see now it's starting to grab. Sort of at that point, you want to just grab your... So I transfer it at this stage to a bigger bowl because it just gives it a bit more space and time to rise. You just want to grab it all. You can see it's very wet. Big mass of dough like that. Into the other bowl, and then you leave a fair bit of dough behind. So I like to just go back and grab all that. Alright, so I'm going to chuck this in the fridge, but you could probably get away at this point with not doing that. The dough is already, I can already tell that the starter's starting to work. I should have put it in the fridge in that first phase. And, 'cause, 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 ' So that at this point you're trying to gauge and trade off between like time and fermentation, I guess. You don't want it to rise too quickly because you need to give the sourdough time to actually like give it flavor and consume it. If it rises too quickly and it goes too much, your bread's gonna be fucked for tomorrow. So I'm gonna try this in the fridge. And then this next phase you're leaving for 30 minutes, and then when you bring it back out, you'll start to stretch and fold, which is like a super quick process. So I'll show you how, like a couple of stretch and folds, and then yeah, for the next video. Boop. All right. So the next phase, it's been 30 minutes. So we're gonna pull the dough out of the fridge, and I'll show you a stretch and fold. It's gonna be a very short video. Again, very simple process. Just move you down like that. Very, very simple. I always just wet your hands. And what you're doing is you're gonna pull the dough up and over itself. And I do it in quadrants, so just 4 times. And it just looks like this. Get your hands underneath it, you can see that. And literally up, over. At the start, when you're doing it, it's going to be very, loosely held together. But as you get later on in this process, you're going to do this so you just literally, that's it, done. Back in the fridge. You're going to do that probably 6 times every half an hour. So over the next 3 hours before you leave it to bulk rise. So, literally, that's it. Very, very quick process. And what you're doing is you're building strength in the dough as you stretch and fold it. And that replaces kneading the dough. So rather than kneading it, you're just stretching and folding it. And you're trying not to like tear the dough when you're doing it. You're just trying to, pull it out, not tear it, fold it over itself a couple of times. And that by the end, you'll notice the dough start to get really sort of aerated as the fermentation as it starts to rise, but also the dough will get very billowy and it'll be like sort of soft and it'll sort of have spring to it. But it will also, then when I pulled it up, it pulled into a big stretch, it stretched significantly. But as you get further in the process, it'll hold together more and you won't stretch it as far. But you'll see that over the next couple of videos. Boop. All right. Round 2. You'll start to see each time we do this, it'll rise, it'll look increasingly full. Wet your hand again, and again. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. Boop. All right, so 4th stretch and fold. At this stage, the dough is going to start becoming pretty well formed now. So probably starting to see it's getting there. But if we just give it another stretch and fold, you start to see that you're starting to build a bit of tension in the dough. It will be holding together a lot more, and it will be starting to get a bit more billowy as well. Cool. Another half an hour. Boop. All right. Stretch and fold number 5. Have a look. Start to notice that it will be much firmer now. You You can do this and it will really start to get billowy. You don't want to do this too aggressively because you don't want to start degassing the dough as you're going. You want to keep the dough, nice and billowy because of when you form it into loaves, it will degas a little bit. You're just trying to keep as much of it in there as possible so that when you are forming it into loaves, you're not degassing it and flattening out the bread. So whatever you want to call that. All right. This will be the 6th stretch and fold. Starting to get even more so. Sometimes it will rise even more than this. But it's really after the bulk rise in a second. So I'm going to do one more stretch and fold. Again, lift it up. Same process. Ooh. Like that, you'll really start to feel it like getting billowy under your hands. Now, I might do one more stretch and fold, typically 6 or 7, depending on how the dough is feeling. Actually, I might leave it, but then now you just leave it for 3 hours at a temperature that, isn't going to be ridiculous. So, and let it chill for 3 hours, and then this is like, this next phase is like the bulk rise, which, you're really letting the starter the bread's going to rise a lot, the dough's going to rise a lot, and then you'll form it into loaves, and then after that it goes in the fridge until the next day. Alright, this has been 3 hours now, so now we will be making up the loaves, and so this is like possibly the messiest part, but the first thing I always do is just give the hot counter a full wipe down. And you're going to want a portion of the counter for doing your, for shaping the loaves, and then there's sort of two parts to shaping the loaf. First of all, you form it up into a round, which I'll show you in a second. And forming into a round is like creating that last bit of tension in the dough. Then you let it relax for 15 minutes. I'll turn the video off then, and then come back for the last, turning it into like a parcel. I'll show you how to do that as well. But you want to have your bench wet when you're doing this. Having a wet bench will mean will stop the dough sticking, and the camera is. We'll stop the dough sticking. So hopefully the camera, if I just step here, well, it should see, so I'll make it loads. Yeah, okay. Just make sure you can actually see it all. Alright. It's night time now, so the lighting's got a bit weird. Okay. Here it is. I'll try to do this all so that you can see it all in view. You'll see now how much that dough has risen. Big billowy bit of dough, and again, just try and get the worst of that off. It will stick to itself almost better than it will stick to anything else. Grab that last bit of dough there. Okay, in terms of billowy, you can see it's like, you can see how full it is. Okay. So, set one, I'm just going to scoop it out onto the desk, onto the bench. Again, the bench is wet, and you'll see how the dough now is really holding itself together. So you think about how sticky the dough is when you're forming it, but the bowl is almost clean. Okay. Now, this whole technique thing does take a little bit of practice. But what you'll do, hopefully you can try and, yeah. So what you're gonna do is, oh, I never told you, by the way, you're making 2 loaves. All of the quantities we spoke about, the ratios will be the same, you just halve it for 1 loaf, but all of the quantities that we've discussed have been for 2 loaves. So the first thing we're gonna do is roughly line it, and then we're just gonna use our sharp spatula now to just cut the dough in half. Right? And then once you've done that, you form it into a round. Now this is a really bizarre technique. You can already sort of see what you're doing is, I'm trying something in my head, you're like pulling it around and then tucking it back under itself. And you'll see it start to create a lot of tension in the dough. I'll do it on this one here, if you can see it. You can see how you sort of pull it around and then tuck it under. And what you're doing is creating all that tension in the dough and turning it into a round. So again, you can see the bubbles, all the bubbles starting to come through. It's probably might be a little bit hard to see in the thing. Okay, so once you've got a bit of tension in them, right, and you've got this, yeah, like that, you just can grab them. You can be quite, what's the word? Not aggressive, because you don't want to be degassing them, but you want to be making sure that you are getting a fair bit of tension in them. Right, like this. Like that, you see they're like nice plump rounds. And once you've done that, we are just going to let them sit now for another about 15 minutes. So what you want them to do, and when I turn the video back on, you'll see this, they will flatten, they'll all settle back out. And you want them to do that so that when you do the final, it's not stretch and fold, but the final, like turning it into a parcel and sort of forming the loaf, you just want them to have a little bit more, you don't want them to be super tight. So, but we'll do that in a second. Typically what I'll do as well, just while I wait for this to all get sorted. So again, wet countertop, you don't need to worry about, what's it called? Wet countertop, you don't need to worry about flour. You can actually get away with not putting very much flour down at all. But what I will do is I make my rounds on this side of the bench, and then over on this side of the bench here, I'll just prep it by putting down a little bit of flour. And I mean really not much. Like, probably like that. And again, I'll just sprinkle a little bit of flour on top of the loaves as well. And then in terms of, you'll need some sort of baskets. I use the same bowls that I like, these stainless steel bowls. Like, they sort of recommend wicker baskets, but that just is a whole nother bit of effort. I'll need that again, but forget about it for now. And then you literally get just like a tea towel. And then I usually would do this on the other side of the bench, but because of the camera. And what I do is put the tea towel in, pinch it to get half of an ear, and then push that down inside. And so then, I don't know if you can see that. If I can pick that up without it. You sort of see how sort of making as if you were to take paper and turn paper into a cone, you're sort of folding it in on itself to get it to bowl in. And then you've got these little ears which become part of the wrapping stage, but again, we'll get to that in a second. And then you just want to, you'll do that with both bowls or however, per loaf of bread. And then you'll just give it a little dusting of flour, again, not much. You don't want to add too much flour here. And then that will be ready for your loaf when it's done, and I'll do the other bowl off camera. Okay, so it's been roughly 15 minutes, not really, but looking at the loaves, and I think they've sort of settled enough. So I'll get a little bit of flour on my hand, not much. Oh, by the way, all the flour that I put on the counter that I've dusted over everything, it's the wholemeal flour rather than the rather than the actual baker's flour. So now this does take a little bit of, like, you just got to sort of manhandle the dough a bit here. A little bit of flour on the hands, it's got a little bit of flour on top. You literally just scoop it up. You don't want to go everywhere. Quickly get it down on your flour pat. And now hopefully you can see this. Now at this stage, what you're doing is you're creating a parcel. So the first thing I do is stretch out each side onto itself, like this. Side. And trying to do this gently, side, right? So you got a little sausage roll, pull the top out, top over, right? And now this is a bit weird, but you're sort of pinching and stitching, right? So you want to pinch and stitch, pinch and stitch, pinch and stitch, pinch and stitch. And once you've got like a sausage roll, grab the back and you literally just fold it all onto itself. And then boom, you got this lovely little ball of dough. And then you just want to grab it. And you can see it's all folded in on itself. And then boom, chuck it in your basket, ready to go. And I was sort of talking about before with the ears. So again, the ears are here, right? From that little, so they just sort of fold over nicely now to cover the rest of the loaf. You got like 1, 2, and then I just grab the back. And then like, so if this is the rest of it here, right? I grab it about halfway up. And then you just pull it over it, and then it just that should then prevent most of the air getting to it. You will get a bit of a skin on top, but that's fine because that's technically the bottom. So tomorrow morning when I film the next video, what's actually going to happen is you'll invert it to then put in the crock pot, and then that becomes the bottom. So we've sort of put them in these bowls upside down technically. I'll quickly. Might as well quickly do the other one while the camera's running. You can see that you start to get a little bit of flour everywhere, but it's not as much as can happen. So again, just scoop that one up, chuck it down. And again, you're trying to do this sort of quickly, but you're trying not to degas the dough too much. You can sort of see, I don't know if the camera can pick up, there's like this little bubble here. There's a whole bunch of bubbles. So you're trying to keep those intact, but again, one, out, and in. Sides, the lid, and then again stitch it over, stitch it over, stitch it over, and then again you grab the top once you've stitched it into a sausage roll, and then you're pulling that over the top of itself like that into a nice neat little round. And then once you've got that little round, scoop it off the countertop. It should be that way around, and then dump it into your. The longer you hold it, the more you give the dough a chance to stick to your hands, which I'm sure is pretty. Anyway, I'm probably telling you the obvious. You've handled dough before. And then boom, that's your rounds or your loaves sort of formed and ready to go. I'll just wash my hands, and then that literally will go straight in the fridge. So again, in terms of like timing, I mean, we've gone from like making the dough takes about 10 minutes, making and then maybe like 15 including the adding of the second stage of the water and the thing. Then you've got like, I don't know, you just got to be present for those half-an-hour intervals, but it's like you saw like less than a minute to do the stretch and folds. And then to form the loaves, again, making the rounds takes 5 minutes, and then actually like stretching, like making the parcel takes another 5 minutes. So in terms of like total actual time, it's probably less than an hour. You just obviously have to be present all day, and that doesn't include the time like you spend feeding the starter, etc. But again, that's also pretty straightforward. And then let's just clean it up. That'll come out the fridge tomorrow morning. As I'm heating up the oven, but I'll do another video for that anyway. So, whoop! All right, morning. So we're gonna cook the bread now. So, you wanna crank the oven up, 250. Oh, hold on. Hold the phone. Hey, there we go. Then you want to crank the oven up to 250 and preheat your Le Creuset / Crofton. I use baking paper, but whilst it's preheating, I just throw it in. Take about 20 minutes in our oven to preheat. But yeah, I crank it 250, and then I put it on fan force, but not using the elements, because it applies too much heat on the top and bottom, burns the loaf. And then in terms of, I reuse this bowl to help with like the whole inversion process, which I'll show in a second, because it's a little bit, not tricky, but like there's a bit of a technique that makes it a bit easier. And then in terms of the loaves, I think yesterday when we were making them up, I didn't split it very well. So we got one, and you'll see it's got a little bit of a skin on top now. That one's a bit smaller, not exactly the same sizes. And then this guy's bulging. Two ready to go. But I will leave them out now whilst the oven heats up. Just like, I mean, I've put them in pretty much straight out of the fridge in the past, and it doesn't matter too much, but yeah, actually I'll leave them on this bench here. But yeah, it's one of those things that you don't want them to be going in super cold, but I don't know. It's not made too much of a difference from what I can tell. Yeah, so, but I just get them out at this point, so. All right. Okay, so the oven is ready, and so I'll get the crock pot out, and then I'll show you how to do this transfer. Latte. All right. So I leave the crock pot in the whole time until I'm done, until I'm ready to go, but I'll show you how this transfer works. So we've got our loaf like this, and again, I use this same bowl that we use to keep the dough in, and then because the dough, you're trying to be as gentle as possible with it, because you really don't want to like degas it at all. I use this process to like keep without having to like grab the dough or get it out or flip it out, because you risk like ruining the loaf pretty quickly. So I cover the top of the bowl like this, and then literally just get it, place it down on top, push it down like this, and then slide it off the edge, get your hand underneath it, and then flip the whole thing. And then you can just grab your little ears, pull them apart like this, like pull it straight out, and then that will just release the loaf into there. It smells really good. It should smell the scent, and Aki will probably touch on this with the starter, but the smell of the starter should smell sweet and fruity. If it starts to smell really vinegary and sour, then you're starting to get really far down that like sourdough end of the spectrum. We like it not that far down, like it's still got lots of flavor, but it's like the smell of it's more like sweet fermented fruit, like fruity, yeah, a sweet fruit smell rather than okay, cool. So I'm gonna get the oven out, and then I'll show you the scoring. Get the oven out, get the crock pot out. You obviously want to do this relatively quickly. I typically would do it on the other side. I do it over here. Oh shit. Okay. So the perks of doing it like this is that you can just use this like a hammock. So literally just transfer it in. And then with your thinnest, sharpest knife, it's just a paring knife, but it's a really thin one, you just give it a good score. Cut through that skin. Now, the scoring is, as you've probably made bread before, is giving the loaf a place to expand in so that it doesn't just blow up. And people get all have different ways of scoring. I just like doing one nice big score right down the middle. I think it looks good, and just how we do it. So, and then that's it, scored, ready to go. And you're going to chuck it in the oven for 20 minutes with the lid on. So 20 minutes with the lid on, to keep all the steam inside the crock pot. And then in 20 minutes you'll take the lid off and leave it in the oven for another 20 minutes, and that'll give it a nice golden crust. And then that's it, your loaf's done. But I'll show you that halfway in a second. Okay, this is just the halfway point. I'll just quickly show you and then get it out to show you. Typically I wouldn't pull it out of the oven, but you see how much that's rising already? Pretty hot. Okay, cool. And then you just leave that in there now for another 20 minutes. And we're good to go. It's time. You alright? Alright, so it's been 20 minutes. The last 20 minutes, we'll get the loaf out. In all honesty, at this point, you can go a little bit longer. There it is. You can go a little bit longer. All that's going to do is just how golden you want the crust. So you can, boom. There it is. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, you can go a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. It's dependent on how golden you want that crust. And then you literally just whip out the thing from the crock pot and then go again. Because it's already sort of got a shape to it, I just chuck it straight on top of the bowl this time around. So, where are we? I like to just get it, put it straight down on top like that. And then put the bowl down on top. And then do the old flipperoo. Like so. The only thing to keep in mind now is that this paper will start to get, I've got 2 uses out of every piece that I've used, but sometimes it starts to get weak and flake off. Make sure this is done on it. Score it again. Probably need to get a lot of people use razor blades with a special baker's knife, but I don't have that, so. Oh. Traffic in the kitchen. And then boom. Do your second loaf straight away. And there you go. And that's the loaf. And just to give you a final shot. Ow! You can clearly see I mean, even with that big score, it's still split, so anyway.